Kelsey, can you hear me? Are you there?
On the
Someone
working on the Every Kid Deserves a Bike program. I'm also here with my colleague Tiani. I'm going to give her a second to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Tiani Zapata. I am the Sustainable Transportation and Equity Fellow for the City of San Francisco and the County Office of Education for San Mateo.
So we are here to discuss the Every Kid Deserves a Bike program. And this really energizes me because BPAC was one of the first groups that we had brought the Every Kid Deserves a Bike to back in 2021. We piloted it in 2022, and here we are in 2023, ready to revise the program, expand the program, and deliver one that's just might be just a little bit better than last year's. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more. So as a refresher, for those of you who were not here or did not see the presentation and back in 2021, this was our pilot program description. And what it basically says here is that the Every Kid Deserves a Bike program was designed to provide our Title I elementary schools, Spruce and Martin Elementary, with the equipment, skills, and knowledge to safely ride a bike, boost self-esteem and feelings of belonging for our scholars in our underserved neighborhoods of South San Francisco. Now, the Every Kid Deserves a Bike rests on a shared vision. The vision being that South San Francisco is a community in which bicycling is safe and equitable. And really, it's built on these three pillars: safety, accessibility, and equity. And so what we know about owning a bike is that owning a bike is an equity issue. It is fairly costly to own and maintain a bike. You may also know that in South San Francisco, we don't have a bicycle shop. So should something happen to a bike, you'd have to lug it up to San Francisco or bring it down to Redwood City. And without access to transportation, this can become quite a burden. We also know that bike ownership builds self-esteem and encourages a healthy and active lifestyle for our scholars. And also in practicing this behavior, we can foster a safer transportation alternative, and then we're also reducing single occupancy vehicles on the road, and especially air pollution near our schools. And so in 2022, when we had piloted the program, we gave 150 bicycles, 150 helmets, 150 locks. Skills and training was also administered to 150 students of South San Francisco. As a result of this great program, we were actually awarded the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition 2022 Program of the Year Award. In addition to that, we got some really sweet thank you letters from our students who had participated in the pilot in 2022. And over the summer, we actually got a report from one of our teachers who had participated with her classmates in this. And basically, she was saying that she saw students riding their bikes throughout the summer. She observed them using their safety training skills, wearing helmets. So they're adopting this behavior, and it's a vehicle that's able to get them to and from school. And so as a recap of 2022, as a reminder, we did 150 units, so 150 decathlon mountain bikes, over 150 helmets, because even though there were some students who decided not to opt into the program, we still gave them a helmet. And then combo U-locks. And we did the combo U-locks because, as you know, kids lose keys. And so we wanted to make sure that they had the option, if they did lose the key, they would be able to still get to their bike using the numerical pad. Now for the skills and education portion, we had a bike rodeo, and this was administered through the San Mateo County's Office of Education, and then as well as ABC checks, so checking the air, the brakes, and the cranks. And then we had a pedestrian safety training, so it wasn't just for bikes, it was also for pedestrians. And then we had these sweet walk and roller safety goodie bags that had some additional information on there. With the technical assistance side, we partnered with our South San Francisco Police Department to register all the bikes. So every single bike was registered, and we registered the bikes in the event that it gets stolen or lost. We would be able to recover it to its rightful owner. And of course, with that, kids are varying heights. And so we had that seat adjustment and tire pressure check for every single bike that was out there. For the distribution side, so this is an example of how the distribution was done on the day of. We did the distributions back in May of 2022, and this is in parallel with National Bike Month. Actually, Natalie volunteered with us for some of these, so maybe she could speak to that too. But essentially, they would start in one line. The one line would have the bike pickup line. Then they would go up to station 2, where they would pick up their helmet, and these helmets were custom fitted to their head size. And then over at station 3, they would register their bikes. They would follow on over and they would have a refreshment table. We also had a little craft table for kids who were not able to opt into the program. Reason being that they weren't able to opt in is, maybe they already had a bike, but we also had several equity issues related to this, being that they just lived in a small apartment or, lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. They just weren't able to host the bike in their own homes. So they had to opt out, but we had a craft table for them to still participate, and they were more than welcome to participate in the pedestrian safety segment. In addition to that, they were able to pick up their bicycle locks and their safety goodie bag. So it was really an all-day affair. And this happened at the site of the school for ease of the children to access it. And then also so that when the parents came to pick them up, they'd be able to load up the bike right away. So here we are, 2023. What is changing? Where are your expansion plans? So one element of expansion is that 150 units from 2022 is now doubled plus 50. So we're talking about 350 units this year. Now, it's not just going to be Spruce and Martin Elementary. We've also incorporated Sunshine Gardens Elementary, Los Cerritos Elementary, and Parkway Heights Middle School. And I'm going to let Tiani talk about Parkway Heights Middle School and a little bit more about middle school demographics in a bit. But 350 units across 5 Title I schools in South San Francisco. This is big. This is huge. For the equipment upgrades, what we decided to add on in addition to the brand new Decathlon mountain bikes, as well as the helmets and the locks, is also to have the addition of bike pumps, kickstands, and a glam station. For equity reasons, we decided to order 150 of identical bikes, but we also wanted to give the kids an opportunity to customize their bike and have a feeling of ownership by having it customized to their whatever their likes are. So we decided to do stickers, colored bike spokes, etc. And there's also an additional education portion, and I'm going to let Tiani talk about that.
Great, thank you, Tamiko. So in addition to providing the equipment, skills, and knowledge to safely use a bike, we also wanted to show kids just how big of an impact they can make by choosing to ride a bike to school and around their community. So to do this, we have included a fun and interactive environmental education segment that will hopefully teach students the basics on climate change and the complicated processes surrounding it. We are also including an optional hands-on interactive learning activity with the Marine Science Institute, who provides an engaging adventure with students right in their own classroom, led by a team of expert marine science educators. So it should be fun.
Thanks, Tiani. And then why did you choose middle school?
So why middle school? This image here was taken from a Noodles article about a similar bike donation program in Framingham, Massachusetts. And according to their assistant superintendent of equity, diversity, and community in charge of the program, middle schoolers were targeted because administrators often felt they don't have the independence or resources of other students. They focused on middle schoolers because from their experiences, they were often left out. And after a little bit of research on my end, it was clear middle schoolers are often looked over and left out of, looked over and not prioritized when it comes to educational activities, such as these that are outside of the regular classroom curriculum. And it's unfortunate because studies show middle schoolers are at a critical age group, and participation in extracurricular activities have shown could be very beneficial to them. And then lastly, we see a desire from our own community. As some of you may already be aware, last year, Jackson Lazari, a 12-year-old middle school boy from South City, successfully advocated for the inclusion of a bike pump track at Centennial Trail Park. And he said that he mostly did it for the young kids that wanted to start riding a bike. So our plan to include middle schoolers this year in the distribution was a no-brainer.
Thanks, Tiani. So as a recap, here is our full scope plan for 2023. 350 units for decathlon mountain bikes, helmets, combo U-locks, bike pumps, kickstands, that glam station I was telling you about earlier, and going to the skills and education portion, all the same things that we had last year with 2 new additions, one being that climate change education presentation. And the second is this new segment, 1, 2, 3, Ride With Me. From last year's experience, we learned that there were some kids who's never even gotten on a bike in their life and they didn't know how to ride a bike. And so we're going to portion off a segment of the blacktop to give students an opportunity to learn how to ride a bike from the foundational phase before setting them over to the bike rodeo, where they'll learn the more advanced skills. On the technical assistance side, we still do plan to partner with our police department to get all of those bikes registered, still doing those seat adjustments and tire pressure checks, and then also adding in the kickstand sizing and installation as they are different for every child's height. And that concludes our presentation. We're more than happy to take any questions, comments, or concerns, or any feedback that you may have for us.
I have a comment and a question. First, D'Amico, the one that I participated in was really well run and really well done. And I saw the smiles on the students' faces, and that was great. And so I'm looking forward to how you expand and what you do this year. It's really, really, really good program.
Thank you.
My question is, given that we've given out 150 bikes so far, and we've got some experience with the students using the bicycles over the summer, I was wondering if there was a plan to do a post-use or post-distribution survey for the students and the families to see what impact this program really has had on the students and the families.
That is a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. And we are often asked about that. I think in 2022, we were so focused on making sure that the kids had a good experience. We didn't stop to say, hey, well, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? What was the feedback that we got? Luckily for us, the feedback that we did receive was all good feedback. But yes, we would love to measure the impact that it had on the student's life. We have discussed the possibility of doing a pre-survey when they fill out their permission slips, and then doing a post-survey after they've received the bike. It would be great if we could administer that survey, because as you remember, we just do the distribution in May. So they're into the summer, they've had it for 3 months. And then when they come back to school to do a survey, say, well, what was your experience like using your bike over the summer? So definitely in discussion, we would like to explore it further. And thank you so much for that question.
Darryl?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I didn't realize how big of a program it was. I went to, as part of my job, I went to the Dutch Cycling Embassy conference last year, which they hosted in San Francisco. And we got to talk with people who work like in the bicycling industry and who advocate for bicycles from the Netherlands. And one of the things that we talked about was what are some of the barriers to bicycling? And the one thing that they said is that it seems like in the United States, kids aren't exposed to bicycling early on. So this is like an incredible opportunity to like change that. As you know, the Netherlands is one of the top bicycling areas, especially in Amsterdam. So I guess that follows up with Natalie's comment. I would love to see like an evaluation of this, because I think there's a lot of lessons learned about it. And also I'm curious where the funding is coming from.
Great question. So last year's program, we were able to secure donations and grants through Genentech and the Rotary Club. Now that was a smaller scale program. Given this year's expansion to 350 units with the additional equipment upgrades that I had mentioned earlier, we're having trouble securing that funding. Now, what we will do is we will follow through with our purchase orders, and we will find the funds one way or another through some pot of funding that we have within the city manager's office. But Tiani and I are actively going out and soliciting donations from our biotech companies, some of our community partners, as well as writing grants. So I'm glad that you actually brought that up, because we are currently applying for 2023's Get Healthy San Mateo County Community Implementation Funding, and we would love to have a letter of support from BPAC to help us secure this grant. But if you guys know of any bicyclist community who would like to donate any funds or even time, we would really appreciate it. One of the barriers that we came up with this year is due to staffing shortages. the vendor that we're ordering the bicycles from, last year they assembled all 150 bikes for us, and then we just hired a third party to do that safety check. But this year, due to low staffing, they won't be able to assemble those bikes. And when we asked a third party how much it would potentially cost to assemble the bikes, they quoted us for $30,000. That's $30,000 that we did not account within the budget. And so now we're looking to rely on community volunteers and bike activists within our community and SBBC. We've also reached out to them to see if they would be interested in donating some time and their labor, really, to help us out to assemble these bikes for these young scholars.
I'm curious, just real quick, what was the what was the selection process for this particular vendor, and how do we end up with these bikes?
Great question. So in 2022, well, we actually purchased in 2021, I believe, but there was a huge supply chain shortage for bikes. And because of that, we had a really hard time finding a vendor that was going to be able to supply us with 150 bicycles in one shipment. And Decathlon was referred to us through the Bikemobile. And we went with them just because they were a reference from someone that we had trusted and had worked with in the past through the county. And the second reason is because they just so happened to have the stock available, and they're local. They're actually based in Oakland. So we were able to get a nice discount on the shipping and delivery fee.
All righty. I think it's a wonderful program. Great. What would be nice to see is us getting a bicycle repair shop in town. If we could encourage one of those from Redwood City to move up here, and maybe our economic community development could get involved in that. Chris, you're good at that. Anyway, any other comments? Hearing none. Tamiko, Tiani, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right, Chris, item number 2.
Chair, I just wanted to confirm we're okay with drafting up a letter of support for their grant application, and we'll circulate that around.
Oh, absolutely. I believe, I think there was consensus among our members here that we're all very much in support of this program. Yeah, so yes.
Confirming. Thank you.
Yeah, and probably will help build bicycles if needed.
I think we could probably do a volunteer weekend.
Yeah,
yeah, with all our different resources. You know, we if not our own skill sets, we could do something good with that.
Definitely. We'll keep in touch with Tamiko on that. Next item, Chair.
Yes.
Just wanted to queue up Billy Gross here to talk to you about the Lyndonville specific plan.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to see all of you again. It's been a bit of time since we've been here. As most of you know, the City Council adopted the general plan updates, which included the general plan, the zoning ordinance, climate action plan, and environmental for all of that late last October. And so we now have quite a different kind of baseline in place. One of the things that the general plan did was identified kind of areas of change where we knew that kind of more significant change and redevelopment was likely to happen. And one of those was Lyndonville. And so because of the marked changes to Lyndonville being industrial now and moving to allowing residential and having a mixture of uses that you don't typically see mixing in general zoning, we decided to move forward with a specific plan for the Lyndonville subarea. Let us get a little bit more detailed into the policies and make sure that we're dealing with the transition as well as possible. So we started this work on the Lyndonville specific plan last summer, and working with the Ramey and Associates and their larger consultant team, which is the same consultant that did the general plan update for us. So this evening, I'm joined by Eric Yurkovich with Ramey and Associates, Taylor McAdam with Fair and Peers, and Rachel Sharkland with Plan to Place, who are all members of the consultant team. So I'm going to turn it over to Eric to walk us through the presentation for this evening. And then we'd love to hear any feedback that the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee has on some of the alternatives we're having, and then some kind of policy, general high-level policy questions that we'll have for you. And looking forward to a discussion with all of you. So I'll turn it over to Eric.
Thanks, Billy, and thank you for having us here this evening. We really appreciate it. My name is Eric Kirkovich. I'm a principal at Ramey & Associates, and we've been working with you guys, city staff, and community since back in 2019. So it's really exciting to get into this level of detail that we're doing through this specific planning process. I'm going to pull up my slides now, so give me just a quick second to do that. Everything's set for us. And each and every time I have to refigure out how to flip my screens in PowerPoint. So really tonight, myself and Taylor are going to kind of walk through a presentation for you about the Lyndonville specific plan. We'll highlight what the specific plan is. We'll give kind of a little bit of an overview of some of the existing conditions analysis that we conducted last year. We'll talk a little bit about what the general plan vision was for Lyndonville. And then we're going to start a conversation with you all about a series of toolkits and some example alternatives that were developed to kind of illustrate what those toolkits were when they kind of come together, all within the context of Lyndonville. So I'm going to talk just really quickly to begin with about what the specific plan is. So the specific plan is really a planning and zoning tool for the city. It takes that community vision that was established during that general plan process and defines the detailed policies, city implementation programs, and development standards to really implement that vision for the future. Now, state law requires that specific plans cover several issues, including things like land use, open space, transportation mobility, infrastructure, and program implementation. So what the specific plan really does is take that higher level vision established in the general plan and starts to really pull the pieces together so that you can implement that vision moving forward. Now, there's already been a large number of kind of technical studies and plans that have already been developed both regionally, citywide, and within Lyndonville specifically. So our job is not to redo all of that work, but it's really to lift up and build off of the key elements of those and apply those more specifically in the area and really put in place the programs, the measures, the tools that the city can use to really further those values within those plans. Now, in addition to kind of community engagement work that I'll talk about in a second, our team will be creating and doing a series of technical studies to complement our process. And so these studies will analyze the current conditions in systems like water, utilities, transportation, and then understand the localized impacts of future growth on those systems. And you can see we're going to be doing things around complete streets, bike ped circulation, which we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to do traffic impact analysis for the area. We're going to look at parking and TDM measures for the area, and we'll be doing some level of service analysis as well. But really the focus tonight is going to be on that circulation system, that mobility network, and how we think about the streets in Lyndonville. Now, as Billy said, the planning process has been going on since last summer, and this is just a really quick illustration of where we are currently in the process. So we finalized existing conditions, and that was part of your packet for the evening tonight. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we've really shifted into physical design and policy alternatives for the area. And so to do that, we've been testing different land use and urban design patterns in Lyndonville with a kind of a kit of parts that we're going to talk about tonight to really understand the trade-offs between different policy questions, like where to put residential, where commercial uses should be, and then how to complement those uses with active mobility networks, transit networks, and the like. And this has really been the focus of our work over the last couple of months, and a lot of engagement has been going on around that as well. So we'll summarize a little of that toolkit. And the goal is really to have a public draft of the specific plan out next year for review, out this summer for review. So over the last 2 months, we've been going through and doing a series of engagement activities around that kit of parts that I mentioned and some urban design alternatives. We've been mixing both in-person meetings with virtual meetings, and through those meetings, we've been gathering input on the kit of parts and the draft alternatives. And in general, we've been trying to kind of focus the conversation of each meeting on the kind of the focus of the commission or the community members, so as to really not overwhelm folks and really get feedback on areas of expertise. So tonight we'll talk very specifically about mobility. So really we do want to give you kind of a quick glance of what it's like in Lyndonville today. So it's going to be just a kind of a high level overview of some of that strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses analysis that we did. And again, that's in your packet if you want to go into that in more detail. And all of those findings are in that packet. They're for this evening, but they're also on our project website as well for those folks who are interested in checking it out there. So I think it's always important to really start with where we are to go back and think about where we were in the past, because it really helps us to understand how we got to the Lyndonville of today. So, Lyndonville was originally inhabited by indigenous populations, then was later used by settlers for cattle grazing and dairy operations. But in the late 19th century, a town with residential uses began to be developed here. And by the early 20th century, you can see the arrival of the industrial uses within the area. But both residential and industrial uses coexisted for about a half a century in Lyndonville, and residential uses went away about in the 1950s or so, but those industrial uses still remain today. And that history is really evident when you walk or bike or drive around Lyndonville. You can see that Lyndonville is really an industrial and production, distribution, and repair stronghold for the city. About 80% of the land area is used for industrial uses currently. You'll also see there's office uses, and we're starting to see some research and development uses emerge as well. Lyndonville has no residential today, but there are new project applications that the city is reviewing now for residential uses in the northern part of Lyndonville. And then in terms of retail and services, you have some of those along South Spruce corridor, but there are no parks and open space really in the area except along Colma Creek. And so a lot of those kind of uses and amenities that would support residents and businesses in the community aren't yet there. So that's a little bit of background on the kind of the plan itself and the existing land use. Now I'm going to turn it over to Taylor. She's going to talk a little bit about the background on the mobility network. Taylor?
Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor with Fair and Peers. So as many of you probably know, if you don't spend a lot of time in Lyndonville, you don't happen to accidentally end up there because it's not that well connected to the rest of the city. It is very close to some exceptional regional transportation facilities. BART in San Bruno is right on the border. And then the new Caltrain station on East Grand. They both, much of the district falls within a half mile of these two options, but it's hard to connect to them. And that is because of some pretty major barriers like 101 and Colma Creek, but also just some more mundane, like everyday barriers. There are pretty narrow sidewalks. Many of the sidewalks within Lyndonville have obstructions because space is limited and their businesses take up a lot of space. There's some places where there aren't crosswalks, and then there are places with missing sidewalks. So next slide. All of this, kind of combines to create a challenging pedestrian network. The purple in this map shows where there are missing sidewalks, and then the green, orange, and red shapes illustrate what's going on at all of the intersections. So these are all the intersections. If it's a green filled in circle, it means you've got all of the things you want. And if it's a red empty circle, it means you're missing all the things you want: ramps, crosswalks. And then there's, a handful of intersections that are somewhere in between. They have some pieces you want and you're missing some others. So definitely some improvements to be made to make this feel like a complete, safe pedestrian network. And then one thing to point out in particular is the district, or Lyndonville, is bordered by Centennial Way Trail, which is of course a spectacular pedestrian and bike facility, but there's only 2 connection points, one on South Spruce and then one like way down on South Maple, which is right there in the middle. So fantastic facilities, again, kind of like the regional transit options, but hard to get to today. So we're going to talk about how we can improve that. We also want to talk about bicycle facilities, which is the next slide. Today, this map is showing existing routes in solid colors, and you may say, oh, there's no solid colors in Lyndonville, and that's correct. There are no designated low stress routes in Lyndonville today. But through the Active South City Plan, there are lots of ideas about where to add routes in the future. And if you just click through a couple times, Eric, there's 2 north-south routes that are proposed, kind of major north-south routes, one on South Spruce, one on South Linden. Those would both connect to Centennial Way Trail. Then there are east-west connections proposed, the main ones being on Railroad, Victory, and then Tanforan, which is the border with San Bruno. And then 2 kind of ideas for how to get people across 101, which of course is, a major barrier, but when you do, you get access to the Bay Trail. So one option is across Utah Avenue, which is not a connection today, but I'll talk about in a second, is a potential connection in the future. And then the other is a kind of the idea for an overpass, a particularly bike pedestrian overpass around San Bruno Canal. Next slide.
All right, thanks, Taylor. And so we wanted to, that's a little bit of the background on what the existing conditions are today. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what the vision was that was defined through the general plan process, but then also talk about kind of the kit of parts that we developed and the alternatives that we sort of started to test as physical design alternatives that we started to test. And then we're going to go in then into more detail into the kind of the kit for mobility. So as most of you all know, and many of you, I think, participated in that general plan process, we worked over about a 3-year period with the community, staff, city council, planning commission, and other decision makers, really to define a long-range vision for the city, land use strategy, and guiding policies kind of citywide, but also very specifically for the Lyndonville, what we call sub-area or areas. And so the general plan really described that vision for Lyndonville, and it really becomes what I would call always the umbrella or sort of the framework for which we start building the specific plan. It's really what we're trying to achieve. And so the specific plan itself is trying to move the city in more detail towards that vision plan. So Lyndonville is a vibrant and inclusive neighborhood that maintains a base of job opportunities, promotes the creative economy, and creates a new residential neighborhood where all people can thrive. So this is, as you can see, both kind of builds on the key assets of what's in Lyndonville currently, but then also kind of transitions and pivots into the future. So along with that vision statement for Lyndonville, the general plan establishes the land use policy for the area. So it retains a large portion of the area for service uses, transportation, and industrial uses. Those are those grays on the map. But the urban fabric of downtown sort of extends south around Tacoma Creek, sort of creating a new mixed-use neighborhood And South Spruce really emerges as a kind of a complete mixed use street over time. And those are those sort of purple uses. And then Colma Creek is really transformed into a sort of a walkable, bikeable corridor that really protects against sea level rise, enhances biodiversity, and provides amenity spaces for all residents in the city. And this vision is generally consistent with the efforts described in the Resilient South City effort. And so as part of the specific planning process, our job has been to take both that larger vision statement and this land use policy and to start to think about how to implement it overall. And so our job has been really to kind of refine that vision and to test different land use, urban design, and transportation patterns within Lyndonville, really with the intent of creating a more detailed and implementable vision for the future. And so to do that, what we did was we started by creating a series of kits of parts. And those kits of parts, what we do, we take those kits and then we kind of assemble them in different ways into policy and design alternatives. And then we get to start asking questions with those different kits of parts and then those different alternatives. So each alternative that we created really uses this kit of parts, and each of the elements of each of those kits are mixed and matched to form an alternative. And so each kit includes both physical design strategies, like policies and programs, but also the kit includes things, this kit really includes things around mixed use residential, open space and blue-green infrastructure, life sciences and office, industrial, arts and makers, and then mobility. So we took each of these kits, we mixed and matched each of them together, and then we started to create these example alternatives. And so these are those three alternatives we took and mixed and matched all those parts up to do. So alternative one is very similar to the general plan. What it does is it sort of balances land uses, concentrating that mixed use residential in purple, again, really along Colma Creek, and creating kind of a transitional industrial area between the mixed use residential and the industrial area, which is in gray. Now, most of the existing industrial area south of Victory Avenue, as well as kind of around the Caltrain tracks, remains. And you can see kind of open spaces are co-located along Colma Creek, and then the navigable slough or the San Bruno Canal. Now, alternative two really start to think about, well, if we allowed a little bit more area to be devoted to mixed use residential, we could allow a broader mix of housing types, and then also accommodate new and additional open spaces within the area. We also started to think about, well, one of the things we heard about is kind of creating this creative economy. So where could we put arts and makers uses? So we thought about kind of centering those along Linden Avenue, and it becomes really a connection between downtown and the San Bruno BART station. And like the previous alternative, you can see Colma Creek kind of extends south and creates more open space both along the Colma Creek corridor and then south from Colma Creek. And then finally, alternative three really kind of allows kind of a more and broader area to be allowed to have residential uses. And this would allow you to have kind of a broader range of housing types, everything from townhome uses all the way up to higher density multifamily types. And like alternative two, you can see that kind of arts and makers area running kind of north-south along Linden Avenue. Again, Colma Creek is kind of expanded and naturalized to allow more parks and amenity space along it, and then extend south all the way down to the Centennial Way Trail. So that kind of linear park with bike ped connections would kind of connect up those two pieces. Now, for your consideration tonight, we're going to go into in more detail of the kind of the components of the mobility network, but really starting at a higher level from that general plan policy and the active South City plan, and then getting into that kit of parts. And with that, I'll just turn it back over to Taylor to go through the mobility piece.
Awesome. So, you know, yeah, we're at this point in the process where we're making some more concrete decisions for Lyndonville, but there are these big projects that have already happened or are underway. So just to provide a little more background, the general plan, as you'll remember, there were kind of 5 guiding principles for mobility: safety, that a future transportation system is safe, connected, multimodal, sustainable, livable. We want all of those things to be true in Lyndonville as well. Next slide. And there are a couple policies or programs that apply from the general plan, and we want to apply here. The first is that we incorporate complete streets improvements into all roadway projects as well as development projects. So yeah, if land use changes in Lyndonville, whatever that project brings, we're going to make sure it is complying with our complete streets principles, which are now written into kind of general code, general plan policy, and in the city's new updated ordinance. The next is to invest in and prioritize non-auto modes. So the city needs to do that in how it prioritizes projects, how it makes its capital improvements plan. But then also we can encourage employers and developers to do the same through TDM requirements. The third policy is to balance traffic operations with a systemic safety approach. So this means we don't blindly just kind of, do level of service analysis and apply the findings. We have to balance whatever we find there with a systemic safety approach, which is a less reactionary approach and hopefully prevents collisions before they happen. The fourth idea is to right-size parking supply and maximize efficiency of curb space. Curb space is really valuable. We've been kind of nonchalant about it as planners for the last couple decades, but it's a really great resource, and we should make sure that we're using it for the best use for surrounding land use, whether that's a parklet or a parked car or a bus stop or bike corrals. So making sure we're using our curb effectively. And then lastly, expanding the low stress bike and pedestrian network and enhancing access to the trail network. You can put bike facilities, but if they're not low stress, you're not going to get as many bikers as you want. The presentation before this was a perfect example. If you want, elementary schoolers riding their bikes, they have to be low stress facilities. So here's some policies that kind of no matter which of those options Eric just talked about we introduce, or no matter which of the mobility kit of parts we apply, we would incorporate these ideas. Next slide. And so then there's 3 particular kind of major development or infrastructure projects that I just want to quickly touch on because they will have a big impact on the district. This is the South Line project, which is right on the border with San Bruno. It is a very large project with some pretty innovative transportation components. The first is that it really links up the street network here with San Bruno in a way that the city's kind of been cut off for quite some time. So Sneath Lane in San Bruno punches through the project and connects directly to South Linden, kind of right around the Caltrain tracks. So that's a major connection that previously was hard to get around. And then the other is that Maple Avenue will now square up with Huntington Avenue, and Huntington is where the San Bruno BART station is. That effort to square up that intersection will also extend the Centennial Way Trail to BART and connect to a future San Bruno facility on Huntington. And then there's loads of pedestrian improvements planned around the San Bruno BART station as part of this as well. This project is fully entitled and will move forward. So next slide. The next one is more at the beginning of the process, but it's definitely in the works. So this is the South Linden and Scott, which is in San Bruno, grade separation project. Caltrain would like to separate all of its at-grade crossings. which right at Dollar Avenue, Linden is an at-grade crossing today. And so as currently conceived, the project would raise the tracks and lower the roadway a bit, kind of a best or worst of both worlds, depending on how you look at it. And, you know, that's definitely creates pedestrian and bicycle safety, vehicle safety. It is more reliable for Caltrain. It also offers an opportunity to realign the roadways right there, which they're kind of a wonky, like curved intersection. So an opportunity to, create better visibility and just safety and traffic operations. But of course, it also creates land use challenges, and roadway realignment, while in the long term would be a benefit, is a major disruption to a key corridor for freight for all of the businesses in Lindenville. Next slide. Okay, and then the last project is the Utah Avenue overpass. And this is something the city's been working on for quite a while with Caltrans. So Utah Avenue is what it's called over on the east of 101 side. And the idea would be to do some realignment of the two nearby interchanges and then actually extend Utah Avenue over the freeway and touch down to meet up with San Mateo Avenue in Lindenville. And this project, again, very kind of in the conceptual stage, but is slated to include a bicycle lane and sidewalk, so it would provide pedestrian and bicycle connectivity as well. I think that's it. So those are some very important background projects, which brings us back to this map here and sort of rejiggers the east-west connections a bit. So rather than just having that Tanforan connection, which could connect to the San Bruno Canal overcrossing, you kind of have this other major option to have a more direct connection from San Bruno through that new punch line through South Line with a realigned Caltrain underpass, and then connecting even to the Utah Avenue extension. So just thinking much bigger, getting people east-west and then eventually to the Bay Trail. So this all sounds great, let's do it. But of course, if you have spent time in Lindenville, this is almost too good to be true, because the streets in Lindenville are very unique within South City in how narrow and constrained they are. So that's why I'm hoping you guys might have some ideas for us today. If you go to the next slide, I want to, start a discussion. This is our discussion topic for today. We can't necessarily do all of that, but I do actually want to pause before we go into the discussion, just if there are any clarifying questions on anything Eric or I have presented, because we've presented a lot. Okay, hearing none, I will keep going. We can answer them later too. But so, we kind of show all these different options for bicycle connectivity, but the space is very constrained in Lindenville. Lanes tend to be narrower. There's parking, which is very oversubscribed throughout the whole area. And then there are very narrow sidewalks without a lot of cushion often between the building frontage and the sidewalk. And so the right of way doesn't allow opportunity to do everything we want often. And so with each of these streets, we kind of have to make trade-offs between walking, biking, and autos. And today I'll show some options for like the two major streets, South Spruce and South Linden, but those are representative of all of the other streets in the district as well. So on the next slide are some initial options we've thought about for South Spruce. And Spruce is actually the widest street in Lindenville. So maybe there are more opportunities with Spruce than with others, but it is also part of the high injury network, which means that it accounts for an overrepresentative number of collisions within South San Francisco compared to other streets. And this is partly because of the speeds at which people drive on Spruce is pretty wide today, 2 lanes in each direction, but certainly not a comfortable environment to bike today, even though you can bike there, of course. It is also currently the Samtrans corridor and connection to downtown. And then in the lower left, you see the existing cross section, 2 lanes in each direction with a center turn lane, and one side has slightly larger sidewalks, pretty generous, actually 8 feet, but 6 feet is more narrow. And we explored a few other options. These are not the only options, of course, but just to generate some ideas. But you could reduce the number of travel lanes to 1 in each direction with a center turn lane, and you could add a protected, like a physically protected bicycle lane, and have space to expand the sidewalk, including adding planting. You could do something similar. You could put a median with paint separated bicycle lanes, or you could kind of go all in on the pedestrian environment. You know, if land use changes were such that you wanted a really strong pedestrian environment and you could have a bike lane without protection, you could, of course, keep the 2 lanes in each direction as well, but that limits what you can do in the pedestrian environment and the bicycle environment. So I'm going to present the next one as well, and then we can kind of come back to these options, but just know there are variations on these options here. So the next slide is South Linden Avenue, but it has a similar right-of-way as San Mateo and Victory and South Maple. So it's about 52 feet across, which is not a ton of space to work with. And here you have, you know, the choice really between parking, bike lanes, desirable pedestrian environment, or expanded sidewalks. And with all of these, we're showing like the final product options on the right, but you could also phase in some of these changes over time with kind of intentional parklets every couple blocks. So yeah, today, 2 lanes in each direction with sharrows, parking lanes on each side, and very narrow sidewalks. If you wanted to add a bicycle lane, you can only do this by getting rid of parking on one side, even without protection of the bike lane, and you can't really expand the sidewalk. If you wanted to protect the bicycle lane, even just with paint, you would have to eliminate the parking lanes. And then if you wanted to expand the pedestrian environment, you don't really have the option to put in a bike lane. So there are trade-offs here. If we go to the next slide, we can kind of think about this again in the context of the whole network. So here, if those are our 2 main north-south connections, yeah, I'm just curious to hear from this group who thinks about the network a lot more. Like, what priorities do you have, either between bike and ped facilities, or which of these streets makes most sense to you?
I have a thought on that. So I'm very familiar with the Lindenville area, and I've done a lot of bicycling and walking through it. Mm-hmm. Yes, it's kind of a nightmare. I think the big thing for me, I think ideally, of course, we want big wide sidewalks and fully protected bike lanes in the perfect world.
Yeah.
However, the big thing for me is the type of traffic in Lindenville. Mm-hmm. Right. There's 2 things. First of all, there's a ton of big trucks, which makes biking, much scarier for people.
Yep.
Particularly casual bikers. And then there's very high speeds. South Linden I'm amazed at how fast people drive on South Linden. So I think my comment is just that Oh, and also, business use, right? I mean, there's a tremendous number of like auto body shops, for example, and that generates a huge number of cars parked on the sidewalks and on the in the parking lanes. So I guess, my preference would be we try to do things to provide protection for cyclists and pedestrians, particularly because of the kind of traffic in that area. I think that's the big thing for me. If this is so much different than like a residential area or this typical suburb area, you've got cars, you got SUVs, but you don't have the kind of trucks and the kind of traffic that you have like in Lyndonville. So that's my big concern.
Yeah, I hear you. So if you're going to put a facility for bicycles, it needs to be protected, because this part of the city's goal, as Eric mentioned, is to retain the industrial uses. That's a very important, source of jobs and, just like raw materials for the area as well. And so if there are facilities, they should be.
I think last week at Victory Avenue, and I wouldn't want to walk there. I didn't like driving there. So to me, you have there the shared lanes, that's never going to work. With the big truck, there's no way someone's going to want to ride their bicycle on that narrow shared lane. It's scary. Is there any thought of making it go like one way, like make it one-way streets in there so that there's room? I mean, it worked on West Orange, right? It's much safer to drive on West Orange now.
Yeah, it's not something we've considered. One-way streets, the challenges are that they tend to reduce connectivity for, you could design a bicycle facility that was two ways, but a one-way car facility. The truck traffic is a major challenge to one-way travel.
Yeah, the sharing, I don't want to share a road with a truck.
Yeah, no, that's exactly.
But you have it on all your examples, so just remember we don't want to share with the truck.
Yeah, and so do you mean that like if you
on your picture Sharrows?
Yeah, there are Sharrow examples. I mean, unfortunately, the existing condition has Sharrows. But so if there was a protected lane, that would feel more comfortable though.
Yeah, I'm a little confused. Are you planning this for what will be, which would be that you have mixed use? Are you planning it for the conditions now, which is all industrial?
Yes.
Ultimately, we're planning for what it will be, but knowing that will likely take decades for that to happen. This is a very much a long term. But part of one of the things I wanted to go back to was part of Taylor's comment about like it might end up being a road facility like San Mateo will likely stay more industrial. And so we'll have and so maybe that's where it doesn't make sense to have that as your bike kind of north-south facility, where South Linden or South Spruce especially, we definitely are showing ultimately kind of redevelopment of mixed use and mostly residential on both sides. That'll obviously it's still a major way to get between downtown and El Camino, but like each of those corridors will likely have a different kind of use going around it. And so we would make changes based on that.
Because my suggestion on South Spruce would definitely be improving pedestrian way walks. Although, bicycling there can be a little scary. Walking there is not. If you're going to improve it and make it multi-use facilities and put more residentials along, homes along there, it would definitely need an upgrade on the pedestrian side. So I would focus on an area to widen the sidewalks, perhaps. And on South Linden, it sounds like that is already in plan because it's being connected to Sneath, which as I remember when we had the discussion about that new development, is there was already plans to really improve the bicycle corridor and the pedestrian corridor. And so we discussed both of those in a previous meeting. I think, if you're connecting, that's going to be I envision that the South Linden is going to be a major thoroughfare for both South City and San Bruno. And to me, I think if you're going to focus on updating a bicycle area or an area for transportation, for bicycling or other multimodal ways, that street should be focused on, and making maybe protected lanes if possible for bicyclists, as well as definitely updating or making the sidewalks as wide as possible.
No, yeah, and I think one thing that really struck me as interesting with your 3 proposals for what the zoning might look like in the future, I think the third one had a kind of a north-south kind of greenway or parkway or something. I think if we look at Lindenville as kind of, how do we get people through it? The idea of having like a north-south connection through the middle of Lindenville, which is a pretty small area overall, right? Mm-hmm. The idea of having like a greenway kind of path through the middle, north-south, is alternative 3 there, right? That's I think it seems like that could be one way to really balance these really competing needs of cyclists, pedestrians, and industrial traffic, right? If we can provide a way for people to get through Lindenville, largely separated from all the industrial stuff, that to me that's pretty exciting.
Okay, what I would like to add there is I also live adjacent to this Lindenville area, and it's really a nuisance for me having no sidewalks, incomplete sidewalks, tree planters in place of a sidewalk, where I'm walking around dodging cars and trucks, trying to get down to my favorite brewery or to get my car repaired. I leave it at a shop and come back. It's a challenge every time. So I don't know what we can do about that with all of the businesses down there already. And if you can stop them from parking on the street, I would certainly like it. Or if you go back to the South Linden, so on the screen here, I like that middle option. No parking, bicycle lanes both ways, pedestrian sidewalk on both sides of the street. That would be excellent. Just as a footnote on the Spruce one, where you had the protected bike lane at Class 4, I believe it is. I have just a maintenance problem with that. I've seen it. We've got one out of North Access Road, and it's fine. It's great, in fact. But the one here, one up in the city, I think it's on Bosworth Street. They put the lineators in, and the street sweeper can't clean it. And it happens to be a lot of tall trees, and so the bike lane is now a forest duff. All the bark and leaves and branches are filled up, and so the cyclists don't want to use it. They want to go out on the freaking road instead of on the bike lane. So it's like, so I would be kind of avoid that. Well, it's fine if there's no trees around, but if you're putting trees in, then that buffer could be a problem. But that's just a side note. But I like what you've got here, and in that on Spruce, I like that middle plan also. The buffered, just the paint buffer lines for the bicycles, two-way traffic on one lanes. That the top version where you got what we call the suicide lane, that lane in the middle. It's generally not a good option, I think. Put an island in the middle and then put cutouts for left or right turn traffic. That's my take.
I think to your point, Frank, about it's kind of obstructions and everything on the road. I mean, a lot of that is just really enforcement, right? Like there's really not any enforcement in the Lindenville these days of parking regulations or, you know, keeping walkways clear or anything. So so kind of no matter what we do, you know, that's something that'll need to be addressed long term anyway.
I think it's citywide though. I mean, just today my mom and I were out walking.
I agree. It is citywide.
If someone was blocking the street with the sidewalk with their car. So
I think there's you know, particularly with all the auto businesses, auto shops and stuff down there, there's definitely an overflow of vehicles just positioned any place you can possibly fit them. And that's, so, you know, that's an enforcement issue.
Yeah, but I think enforcement is an issue everywhere.
For sure.
I agree with you, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What's the time horizon for all these, this plan?
Yeah, I can kind of address from a mobility perspective, but Eric, maybe you chime in too.
Yeah, for the mobility.
Yeah, so it really is like as land use changes over time, and of course, you know, streetscape changes are a bit chicken and egg with land use changes. Like you kind of want some to happen to encourage, you know, what's out there today on Spruce wouldn't encourage someone to come build housing. It's not a friendly environment, but you also can't change the whole street if it's still meant to support industrial uses. So the time horizon is for these mobility changes is a little bit wait and see how land use changes progress. But like I mentioned, there are also these big infrastructure projects and the South Line projects in the works. So some of them are going to happen relatively quickly.
And I think one thing that go ahead, Billy.
Well, as I say, what I was going to add to that is obviously when you have the South Line type developments, they'll do all the streets in their portion. Most of the rest of this area, that's not the case. It's going to be one-off developments. And so these large kind of street corridors, they ultimately become public projects. And so we're in the process of updating the impact fees now that we've updated the general plan. And so like the citywide transportation impact fee, if we incorporated, like if we identify certain projects as this, those potentially could also get folded into that. And then it becomes a bit of a prioritization because obviously there's these large infrastructure mobility projects that are necessary throughout the city. And so that's where Taylor's comment about kind of what development's happening where will probably be a big part of what prioritization happens for some of these. We're also looking to see what can we do from a like green infrastructure standpoint. So if you're doing road improvements, are there also some stormwater improvements that you're doing in certain areas? And are there ways we can combine some of those types of things? But yeah, there's no set timing. There'll be certain projects. We love when there's large redevelopment projects that come in and are able to take these as part of theirs. We definitely would push those off, but I would say a lot of this, that's not going to be the case. We're not going to make a residential project have to do street infrastructure improvements because we would never get the residential projects then. And so some of that will then become public projects, and that'll be part of the city's kind of CIP process and prioritization to figure out, all right, this is one that we need to do now, or this one might need to wait for another few years.
I think that even if it's for now going to still be mostly commercial, if you're thinking about upgrading the roadways, I think adding a green aspect to that would really help improve the overall feeling of Lindenville. Because now it just feels like a place you don't want to tarry too long. You just want to get through that to get to someplace else. So even if it remains commercial and we upgrade the roadways, if we can include some enhancement so that it's not only just functional, but also it looks like a place where you
Get
want
some greenery here and there,
Yeah.
and that's definitely.
and where
definitely.
you want to walk or where you want to ride your bike. Commercial spots can be that as well. And I think, on the east side, we have many places that are like that. They're mostly commercial, but you want to go take a walk over there.
Anyway, I was gonna follow up with the time horizon. The reason why I asked that is because like the options look incredible. That would be awesome if Lyndonville could have all that. But I just know that because it's industrial, it's not super practical. And just know, like from experience of walking or driving through Lyndonville, cars drive really fast. And so I don't know, are speed humps part of the picture? Because I feel, and also pedestrian crossings, there's almost nowhere to cross if you're on South Linden or San Mateo, and there's a lot more commercial. So those are things that are a lot cheaper, that aren't as capital intensive.
That's a good idea to have some kind of more immediate or midterm types of improvements that aren't dependent on complete redevelopment of the streets.
And then the other comment that I had was, I know a meeting or two ago, the city presented on the Utah Overpass project, and I had very strong opinions on it. If that project does advance, I think I would love to consider like what the circulation would look like in there, because the Utah Overpass project would be on the order of $100+ million, which is really expensive, and it will drastically change the circulation in the neighborhood. Particularly on San Mateo Avenue, there'd be a lot more traffic, particularly from trucks on the street, just to like study that and also look at the cost benefit of like what doing a more capital intensive project versus like the lower cost bike ped, speed humps, crosswalks would do, because there's also trade-offs, and when you put more expensive projects to more cheaper projects that could have maybe a larger impact.
Eric, if you don't mind sharing your screen one more time, just to bring us back to the final slide. Second to final slide, I guess. Yeah, one moment.
Right. So while Eric is pulling up his slideshow, I actually wanted to address committee member Yip's comment about like some near-term improvements. Like I get it, where there's potential to remake the street to protect bikes and improve pedestrian access and everything. But in the near term, we did undergo about a year ago on drafting or coming up with our local road safety plan, which identified, even like a lot of areas in Lyndonville or a few streets where there were some low cost improvements that we can do to improve safety, including like what you said, speed humps and establishing like better crosswalks and better crossings. So those are things that our engineering folks in the city are already aware of, things that they can do in the near term, and something that we will be pursuing, obviously, as grant funding, as our capital improvements program get established on a yearly basis. So those are things that we are already looking at to improve like safety in these areas.
Cool, thanks, Chris. Yeah, that's a good reminder to look at the LRSP. The last comment here is just, so we previously had kind of initiated some alternatives for the main streets, the ones that the Active South City plan identified as bike routes, but it doesn't mean we have to use those corridors for bike routes if, for example, we think Spruce is the best use is to make it a fantastic pedestrian environment. And if bikes really don't fit as well, or same thing for Linden, like if we had to maintain parking and that precludes bicycle lanes, we could focus on a parallel corridor like South Maple, which, as you saw in the alternatives, there are considerations to extend that, try to extend it across the canal. And it could be, you know, if the linear greenway idea doesn't happen from alternative 3, to your point, Phil, South Maple could kind of become the premier bicycle pedestrian corridor that gets you through the district and leaves space for cars and parking on South Linden to support the businesses there. So there are just other options to consider, and it could be more of a bicycle boulevard. Hard to imagine again with today's land use, but that doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the future. And then Canal 2 is one we didn't talk about today, but as the kind of naturalization of the canal and that project continues, there's an opportunity to turn that into you know, a focused bicycle connection east-west, pedestrian connection east-west in more of like a park setting, which could then take the pressure off of trying to squeeze a bicycle lane onto Victory or Railroad. So just remembering we have these parallel corridors as other options. Yeah, so that was kind of the main discussion we wanted to have today. I think Eric's gonna close this out, but any last thoughts on the discussion?
Well, I'll just throw this last slide up there and then pull the slides back down. And sorry to make you go through like 1,000 screens to get back to the slides. Just so you all know, we have a project website. It's at shapessf.com, plan-Lindenville. There's information about the planning process itself, about the work that we've done to date, and about upcoming community engagement activities. There is an online survey about the kit of parts and the alternatives. It actually closes on the 5th, which I believe is Sunday. So feel free to take that survey or to share it with your friends, colleagues, family members, and others. And then as we talked about earlier, we do have a couple of upcoming events. We have Planning Commission meeting tomorrow night, where we'll actually talk in more detail about the land use alternatives. And then we are meeting with City Council on, I believe, February 22nd. So feel free to join those discussions and listen in or share those with other folks. And I know if you have other ideas, you know, often we hear these presentations and a couple hours later we think of an idea that we had forgotten. You know, feel free to share those with staff and they can pass them along to us later on. And we'd love to hear any other comments that you all have. But again, thanks for having us here this evening. We appreciate all of your time and all your thoughts that you provided, and look forward to speaking with you all again in the future.
Thanks, everybody. I'll turn it back over to Chris, but thanks for giving us an hour of your time this evening.
Thank you, Eric and Taylor. And yeah, that was a huge package we got to get over. So we have a lot to think about. If anybody's got any further comments or think about them later, I suggest we write them down and pass them on to Chris. He'll manage that. Again, thank you much. All righty. Any other business, Chris?
Sir, actually, we have quorum, and so our first regular meeting of the year, we're supposed to elect new chair and vice chair for BPAC. So, right. Or we could just make it an authoritarian regime and keep Frank, you know, in place, but you know, that's up to BPAC. So
that would deny me the opportunity to recommend Ariane Guzman as chairperson.
No, I recommend.
I second that motion.
So as an authoritarian establishment here.
All right.
Should I go ahead and take a vote on everybody, regardless of what Ariane says?
Yeah, let me write this down. I know we're being recorded.
She's been here a long time. She's always got great opinions. So I'd like to see her run this show.
Okay, so we had a nomination For Arian Guzman to be chair of BPAC, nominated by Frank.
Any other nominations?
And we will entertain other nominations if you'd like to do that. But did I hear a second?
I second Arian.
But if anyone wants to chair a position, you feel free to cast your name in the pool. But we are also looking for a vice chair.
I nominate Tommy as vice chair.
All right.
I'll second that.
All right. Anyone opposed?
Any more nominations?
Nominations?
Hearing none.
Oh, all right. Should we vote on this?
Yes.
So, yeah,
all right. We'll call. All right. For nomination and second for Arian Guzman as chair, let's call roll. Let's start with Frank.
Aye.
Yeah. Reno is not in tonight. Tommy.
Yes, aye.
Natalie.
Aye.
Arian.
Sure. Yes.
You're in the seat now.
Bill. Did I hear Phil?
Aye.
And Daryl?
Aye.
All right. Congratulations, Chair Guzman. And then now for nomination for Tommy Cheng to be Vice Chair of BPAC, with a nomination from Natalie with a second by Frank. Take a roll call. Again, Frank?
Aye.
Vice Chair Bones, or Reno is out. Tommy?
Yes.
Natalie?
Aye.
Arian?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
And Daryl?
Aye.
All right. Congratulations, Vice Chair Cheng. Well, that was easy. So that means on our next BPAC meeting, it'll be both of your shows, or just make sure you're here. Like, that makes my life easier if we both, if one or the two of you.
Okay. And you'll tell me what to do.
Absolutely. Yes. Don't worry about
that.
Yeah.
All right.
I want to thank Frank for his service. You did a great job. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you,
Natalie.
Frank. Actually, Frank was effectively our chair, or holding our proceedings, since he was vice chair 2 years ago. Because we had a chair that was like rarely here. He had, like, out of our 12 meetings, he had 10 absences. So thank you, Frank, for the year plus of hard work. We appreciate you, man.
All right. Well, thank you. So I'll finish off this meeting. Any other comments from the board?
I have some comment. Yeah, I have some comments. I said a few meetings ago, or about a year ago, I would mention anytime someone was killed on our streets. In November, one of our neighbors, age 18, died in a DUI on South Linden. So I thought that was good that we got to hear an opportunity for improvements on South Linden. Even though it was a DUI, part of the cause was because the person driving was able to speed, and so our neighbor died. I also want to follow up on the status of the Utah Avenue EIR. Do we have any updates on that?
Not that I'm aware of, Committee Member Cheng. Yep, sorry. I would ask you to send an email to Matt Rubel. He's our principal engineer.
Okay.
Just because he's who Caltrans deals with on this project.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
And then also wanted to echo the enforcement on parking on sidewalks, and wanted to see if we as a committee can, like, make a letter or request to the police department or city council to enforce parking on sidewalks. I think it's really important. And even though it does use the police, I think there's minimal opportunities for racial profiling because it's a car and it's hard to racial profile a car. And then my last comment is I also want to acknowledge that the city experienced a lot like heavy rains on New Year's Eve, and that really impacted circulation around. US 101 flooded near Oyster Point, and I just wanted to like mention that because where the city kind of prioritizes its money really impacts their circulation. So there's an overpass there's an Oyster Point overpass on off ramp coming from 101, and the city spent a lot of money on that back in the 1980s. But we also have to acknowledge that we have like 101 is built like at or below sea level. So by building on ramps and off ramps to make it easier to drive, just kind of shows where the city's priorities are instead of addressing things like sea level rise and climate change. That's it.
All righty. All right, any more comments from the board? Hearing none. Items from staff?
Yes, yes, Frank, yes, Chair, former Chair, sorry. I don't know how to address you now.
Oh, I think I'm still the chair until the next meeting.
Oh, yeah, there we go. All right. Okay, Chair. Two announcements. If everyone saw that email about the Safe Routes to School meeting tomorrow, it's now been pushed to the 15th. I'll forward everyone that meeting. You're not expected to attend a daytime meeting in San Mateo unless you really can. Our engineering staff named BPAC as one of our partners or team members for that project. There will be plenty of updates, so don't as we go through it. So
is it? I just had a question. Will we be speaking, or is it just?
No, it's really just to attend and participate. So let me clarify what our roles are for that meeting, and then I'll reach out again. But it's been rescheduled to the 15th, also from 9:30 to noon. So it's a big chunk of time, and that's pretty difficult to ask of you. Second announcement, our next meeting is actually going to be in April. We're trying to line up a Brown Act training because I know that there's several folks on BPAC that have not had that training. I don't think we did it last year, or we weren't able to schedule it last year. So that's something we're working with our city attorney staff to provide for us. Our next meeting will be in April. And the big announcement for that is that AB 449, I think I might have that wrong, but the provisions of the Brown Act that have temporarily been in place since the pandemic that allows us to meet in person have expired or is expiring at the end of February, which means any meetings moving forward after February have to meet in person. So that's the big change that's coming up. Staff and City Council had authorized staff to send a letter to the governor to revisit some of those provisions of the Brown Act, because it will absolutely prevent members of this committee or any other commissions from zooming in. Like, we won't even have that available. Yeah, so that's sort of we're trying to sort things out as we go along, but expect our next meeting in April to be in person. We'll likely have it here in the offices at Planning at 315 Maple, and then I'll make sure that beforehand, I'll make sure to give everybody ample instructions and heads up on how to get here. And that's all I have.
Well, that's kind of disappointing. I know I was reluctant to attend these meetings by Zoom because I liked the hard copies in front of me of the reports and see the people giving them. So, but I've got used to it and I like it. Right. So it's going to it'd be nice to see all you people in person. Don't get me wrong, but it was so convenient sitting here in my living room.
Right. So, exactly. And it's that, like, we're going back to pre-pandemic Brown Act, which means that because every single one of you will be here, got to be printed copies of our agenda and agenda packet. So that makes Kelsey, who's
going to be working hard.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's some things that we're not really appreciating with the snap back to pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
For now, we'll see how it goes. We'll still distribute packets electronically like we have. If anybody needs a copy, we'll print some out on the day of.
Yeah. So, Chris, did you say that it's under appeal with the governor?
Not under appeal. It's just sorry, BG. Do you have
well,
more?
I was just gonna say, there's like most cities are probably giving letters to the legislature, so they're looking to see could they allow for other ways to do it. If that happens, it's not happening this year. So like the earliest they could go back to hybrid or something along those lines would be 2024, because there's going to have to be some discussion on that. Council's been meeting in person, but with hybrid meetings. We're going to do the same thing with Planning Commission. I would guess Parks and Rec might be like that too. A lot of the other ones likely will, and I think it's going to be up to each committee to figure out, do they want to do it just in person and members of the public have to come in person as well? Or you could do it where all the members, the committee members are in person, but you still have a Zoom meeting so members of the public could attend through that, which is similar to what council does now. I think everybody was hoping there was going to be some magic bullet that allowed everyone to go a little longer, but that is not the case. So starting in March, this is happening to every commission in South San Francisco. So.
All righty. Well, on that sad news, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
I second.
And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Meeting's officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
See everyone in April. Congratulations, new chair and vice chair.
See you soon.
Good seeing y'all. Have a good evening.
All right, BG. See you later.
That was good.
Yeah, no, like good questions. I didn't hang on.